Your ancestors could spot a lion half a mile away. You struggled to read a street sign 20 feet in front of you. Somewhere between then and now, human eyesight quietly broke, and scientists only figured out why in the last few decades. Here's the strange part: it's not aging. It's not bad genes, it's something happening to kids as young as 6, and it's happening faster than any trait has ever changed in recorded human history. Let's start with what your ancestors actually saw. For 300,000 years, the human eye evolved for one job: scanning open, distant terrain. Spotting a predator crouched in tall grass a quarter-mile out, tracking a bird landing on a branch across a valley, judging the exact distance to a herd before deciding whether to run or hunt. Your eyes are not built to read. They were built to look far away, constantly, for your entire life. And it wasn't just distance. Researchers studying modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Ache of Paraguay and the Jew/Honsi of the Kalahari, have found something else striking. Their contrast sensitivity, the ability to distinguish a slightly darker shape from its background, tends to outperform urban populations tested under identical conditions. Their motion detection is sharper too, the kind of peripheral flicker catch that tells you something moved in the grass before you consciously register what it was. None of this came from better genes. It came from a visual system trained, every single day, on exactly the task it evolved to do. Some of these studies have even found that when researchers test children from industrialized cities against children raised with heavy daily outdoor exposure, the gap in distance-focused visual performance shows up before either group is old enough to have chosen a lifestyle for themselves. The environment gets there first. And then something happened that had never happened before in the history of the species. We started looking at things 12 inches from our face. In 2015, a team of researchers led by ophthalmologist Ian Morgan reviewed data from across the world, and the pattern they found was staggering. In some East Asian cities, up to 90% of young adults are now nearsighted. Compare that to hunter-gatherer populations still living traditional lifestyles today, where the number is close to zero. Same species, same genes, completely different eyes. So what's actually going on inside your eyeball? Nearsightedness, or myopia, happens when your eyeball grows slightly too long, front to back. Light entering the eye focuses just short of the retina instead of directly on it, and distant objects blur. For most of human history, this almost never happened because the eye only overgrows under one specific condition: close-up focus, repeated for years. Every time you read a book, stare at a phone, or work at a screen a few feet away, your eye's lens has to curve and strain to keep that close image sharp. Scientists call this accommodative effort. Do it for an hour a day as a kid, no real consequence. Do it for 8, 10, 12 hours a day, every day, for years, starting at age 6, and something in the eye's developmental program appears to interpret that strain as a signal: grow longer. Adjust for a life that's apparently going to happen up close. There's a specific mechanism behind this, and it's stranger than a simple muscle strain. Researchers have found that sustained close focus appears to thin a thin layer of blood vessels behind the retina called the choroid. That layer helps regulate how the eyeball grows. When it thins, the eye seems to interpret this as a cue to keep elongating, almost like the eye is trying to physically move the retina closer to whatever it keeps focusing on. Your eye isn't malfunctioning. It's following an ancient set of instructions that assumes anything you look at that closely, for that long, must be something you need to get nearer to. Here's where it gets stranger. In 2008, researcher Catherine Rose ran a study comparing children of Chinese descent living in Sydney, Australia, to children of the same ethnic background living in Singapore. Genetically similar populations, almost identical study habits and screen time, one massive difference. The kids in Sydney spent close to 3 times more hours playing outside. The nearsightedness rate in Singapore was nearly triple the rate in Sydney. Not genetics, not race, outdoor light exposure. Researchers now believe bright natural light triggers the release of dopamine in the retina, and that dopamine appears to slow the eye's elongation. Indoor lighting, even bright indoor lighting, doesn't come close to replicating the intensity of natural daylight. Your ancestors spent nearly every waking hour of their lives outside. You spend most of yours under a ceiling, so the two ingredients driving this are now clear: too much close focus, too little bright outdoor light. Modern childhood delivers both, at scale, every single day. You can actually watch this happen generation by generation. Look at myopia rates in the same country across a single century. In the early 1900s, nearsightedness affected roughly 10 to 20% of people in most industrialized nations, and that number had held relatively steady for decades. Then formal schooling expanded. Then reading became universal. Then screens arrived on top of that. Each shift nudged the number higher, and the timeline lines up almost perfectly with how much close focus work each generation was asked to do, starting earlier and earlier in childhood. But this raises an uncomfortable question. If myopia is this responsive to environment, why does it feel so permanent once it happens? Because it partly is. Once the eyeball elongates during childhood development, that physical change doesn't reverse. Glasses and contacts don't fix the eye, they just redirect the light to land correctly on a retina that's now in the wrong position. You're not wearing a repair. You're wearing a permanent workaround for a shape your eye adopted years ago and can't undo. And here's the thing almost nobody thinks about. That workaround is incredibly recent. The first wearable eyeglasses appeared in Italy around 1286, and for centuries afterward they were rare, expensive, and mostly used by scholars and monks doing close reading work most people never did. For nearly all of human history, if your distance vision was bad, you simply lived with it, and it rarely mattered because almost nobody needed to focus up close for hours a day. Corrective lenses didn't become a mass-market necessity until literacy, factory work, and screens made close focus living the default for entire populations. We didn't just invent a fix. We invented the problem that made the fix necessary, and it isn't just inconvenience. High myopia significantly raises the lifetime risk of retinal detachment, glaucoma, and macular degeneration. This isn't a cosmetic quirk of modern life. It's a structural change with real downstream risk, and it's happening to more children, faster, than at any point in recorded history. The numbers ahead are not slowing down. A widely cited 2016 projection published in the journal Ophthalmology estimated that by 2050, roughly half the world's population, nearly 5 billion people, could be myopic. Not half of one country, half of the species. An eye condition that was rare enough to barely register a century ago is on track to become the default human visual state within a single lifetime. That same projection estimated nearly 1 billion of those people will develop high myopia, the severe form that carries real risk to long-term eye health, not just the mild kind that a thin pair of lenses quietly fixes. Which brings us back to your ancestors standing on the savannah. Their eyes weren't superior in some abstract genetic sense. They simply lived inside the exact conditions the human eye had 300,000 years to calibrate against. Endless horizon, constant bright light, almost nothing closer than arm's length for hours at a stretch. You inherited that same eye. But you're running it inside an environment it was never built to interpret. A screen 8 inches from your face, a ceiling instead of a sky, a world that asks your eyes to behave like they're perpetually reading, and your biology quietly and literally obeys. Some researchers now recommend a simple, almost absurdly low-tech countermeasure. Roughly 2 hours of outdoor time a day during childhood appears to meaningfully cut the risk. Not exercise specifically, not even avoiding screens entirely, just light, distance, the horizon. The next time you take off your glasses and rub your eyes at the end of a long day, understand what's actually happening. You're not looking at a flaw in your genes. You're looking at the last 300,000 years of evolutionary calibration, trying to make sense of a world it never once saw coming.